much.
Hello. So we're going to get a little bit more casual here. We're going to talk about sex. I'm introducing Kathleen Richardson from Montfort University, and this is Ben Goertzel, who is the Chief Scientist at Hanson Robotics. Please welcome him to the stage. So we're going to have a little bit of audience participation here at this point. Before we start, so that the motion is that we should ban sex robots, I would like to see a show of hands just to gauge the room. Who agrees with that statement, we should ban sex robots? Okay. Right, this is, yeah, okay. I hope that doesn't psych you out too much, but we've got a minority review here. Okay, we'll come back to that at the end. But for now, kicking us off, I'd like Kathleen to start with her opening points.
Good afternoon, everybody. Well, good morning. The first thing I'd like to do is I'd like to appeal to your goodness. I'd like to appeal to your humanity. I've not come here to tell you off, to tell you that there's something wrong with you. I really want to connect with what you value in life, and I believe that is our humanity with each other. So I'm going to try and persuade you, and I've got 6 minutes to persuade a male audience, mostly male, about why sex dolls and sex robots aren't a good idea. So the first thing I want to do is I want to look at some of the arguments. One of the arguments is a sex robot is nothing more than a sophisticated vibrator. Now, I don't know if you've ever seen a vibrator, but they're about this big. Some of them are about this big. They're not fully fledged humanoid robots at all. And in fact, as far as I can remember, and I've been looking through the archives, no one ever said a woman would be able to marry a vibrator by the year 2050. Nor did they say it would be a girlfriend. So there is something different going on here, right? I mean, you must agree with that. It's not just a tool. So what is it? What's really behind this idea that a doll or a robot in the form of a woman is something that a man can have a relationship with? He can have an intimate sexual relationship. I think if you really want to understand that, you have to understand our distorted world of inequality. In our world, we live in a world where there are 42 estimated people in prostitution, and most of them are women and girls. So outside of this room, there's a whole infrastructure that says to men, it's okay if you go into the world and not take into account the thoughts and feelings and experiences of women and girls. In fact, you can pay a price and you can have access to their body. And not only that, they're going to bring that to you through pornography as well. So in that world, this egocentric, I call it the egocentric individualism, it's built on a model of the master and the slave. Because the master, too, never had to take into account what his slaves were doing or thinking or feeling. He was the one in charge. So what I'm asking you to think about is this asymmetry in our world that exists, that allows a commercial industry in human bodies, mainly women and girls, to be purchased by men. Sex robots are an outcome of that kind of egocentric misogyny. These women in those industries are not recognized as full human beings because all they need to do is to provide sex. In the same way, the people who create these sex robots are trading on that idea that they're nothing more than sex dolls. So, what can we do about this? Well, I want you to think, I know that you're thinking right now, oh no, this is hysterical. It's not that, it's just a doll, it's harmless. But I want you to imagine for a minute, right, that in an agricultural system, in a factory system today, they decided to develop a robot for the agriculture. But they decided to make that robot a black robot. Everyone in this room would recoil in horror. And actually, the same thing is going on when we design images, these misogynistic images of women and girls in dolls, and we say that's what women are good for. But we've got to a point in our society where we can't even tell anymore whether something is misogynistic or not. So we've had a huge cultural discussion now about sexism and misogyny, because there are so many men out there who think what a woman's good for is sex. If women want real equality, we must ban those industries where our humanity is not recognized. And I tell you what, men, those men in the room that agree with this, your humanity will become recognized if you become our allies, because you stop being an egocentric individual and you start becoming a relational individual, a human being. You get to enrich your humanity by believing in equality for all human beings. And I just want to draw my attention to one last thing, because I think it's about time. Hanson Robotics, it shouldn't be lost on people in this audience that they decided to showcase a robot called Sophia to Saudi Arabia, where they don't even acknowledge the human rights of women, and they have a mass slavery market. And I tell you, women and feminists and men who believe in the equality model that I'm proposing, that was not lost on them, that you decided to showcase your robot in a system, in a society where women are not valued. And I think companies like this, at the end of the day, they want to trade on misogyny. They want to trade on the dehumanization of women. And they don't care about what's going to happen to us or whether there are any negative effects. So I want you to think about your humanity and what kind of humanity you want to keep producing as technologists in the world. And I hope you will choose the equality model.
Okay, right. We've got... Cool. Thank you very much for your opening statement. You've got plenty to be getting on with, so I'm going to just let you get on with it.
Yeah, so there's a lot of different issues wrapped up here. First of all, I have to say, I mean, personally, sex robots is not an intriguing topic to me, all things considered, and I'm going to explain why. I mean, I think we stand at the dawn of something really exciting. Within the next 10 years, we're going to create AIs that are smarter than people. We're going to create robots that, intelligent swarms of nanorobots that can go through our bloodstream and repair the body. We're going to create, a global brain of networked together AIs connecting together all sorts of learning and reasoning machines doing things in every vertical market. And that's the main thing I have been here at the Web Summit to talk about, our SingularityNet project, which is a blockchain-based open market for AI. We're going to connect our brains to computers, allowing us to expand our short-term memory and learn things with a generality and rapidity we can't imagine now. We're going to be able to upload our minds into all sorts of different bodies, not necessarily of human form, or live in virtual worlds as we wish. So given the spectrum of possibilities that are opening up now, I mean, sex robots are really among the least dramatic things that you could think about. And on a personal level, I haven't yet felt a desire to have sex with a robot. I'm perfectly happy with human women so far. On the other hand, why I think this is an important issue is I don't want to see governments and societies go down the road of banning technologies based on, their potential indirect implications. I think that's quite dangerous, and the dangers could be seen a lot in human history. I mean, if you have a robot which is not sentient, it does not have conscious experience in the sense that people do, the robot is not being hurt by whatever the person who has bought it is doing with it, then I don't see why the government should be in the business of stopping a man or a woman from having sex with that robot. I mean, the argument has been made that we should ban people having sex with robots because in some way that's conceptually reminiscent or psychologically related to exploitative things people do with humans. And I mean, that's similar to the argument that you shouldn't be able to play Grand Theft Auto because it's psychologically reminiscent of running people down in the street on your car, or say you shouldn't be able to play the game Civilization because that might make you want to take over the world and become a dictator. And I don't think the government should be in the business of banning things proactively because they may be mentally associated with other bad things, because then you know, then what happens when we have brain-computer interfacing technology? Then what happens when we have nanobots that can modify our genomes to improve us? People will say these things are bad and they're associated with potential bad things, even if they're not directly dangerous. So we don't want governments to do that, both because it's immoral, it's against the Western ideals of freedom, and also because it won't work. If you try to ban these things, they will just go underground and they will be done illegally anyway. And I don't think that's going to improve life whatsoever. So I think we should oppose banning of sex robots. I mean, both because it's a basic imposition on human freedom, and we shouldn't be banning victimless crimes. And secondly, because it would set a terrible precedent for banning advanced technologies and might lead to banning of advanced technologies that are much more important and interesting than sex robots are. And finally, I want to respond to her comments on Hanson Robotics and Saudi Arabia. I mean, I'm not a Muslim, and I'm not the best one to defend that culture, but I mean, of my 3 sons, one of them is a Sufi Muslim, and so I've had something to do with that tradition. I'm not religious personally, but I would say it is not the case that Saudis and Muslim culture does not value women. I mean, they value women very highly in that culture. They do not respect women's legal rights in the way that I personally think they should, and I know that David Hanson, the founder of Hanson Robotics, feels the same way. I mean, we do feel, of course, that women should have equal rights to men, and I mean, we would like to see Saudi Arabia and all countries extend equal rights to men and women. That should go without saying. Nevertheless, I don't think we should be saying that Muslim societies don't value women. I mean, it's clearly not true. If you know anything about it, I mean, one of the first principles is your mother is like your God, and you must obey everything your mother says. There's a great value attached to femininity in the Islamic tradition, but it doesn't go with the notion of inequality. There's different values associated. So the reason I was excited when our robot Sophia was made a citizen of Saudi Arabia had nothing to do with Saudi Arabia. It meant to me that the world at large is like finally ready to think about the question of robots being citizens and robots having rights. I mean, in fact, our Sophia robot is not intelligent enough to really deserve to be a citizen in a Western democracy. I mean, she can't fully understand political issues to vote. On the other hand, that issue doesn't exist in Saudi Arabia, which is not a democracy. So I thought it was quite an interesting way to open up on the world stage the question of robot citizenship. Because if I'm right about how fast AI is going to develop, you know, in maybe 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, we may well have an AI robot which is intelligent enough to deserve citizenship in the US or in Portugal. And it will be very good if by the time that comes about, you know, society has already started to think about robot citizenship and started to work through, like, what will it really mean for a robot to be a citizen of a modern democracy. So I think I'm happy that the government of Saudi Arabia, as part of their push toward modernization, which is including a gradual, although overly slow, increase of gender equality in their laws, I'm happy that the government of Saudi Arabia has taken this step to sort of open up the issue of robot citizenship in the world stage, which is quite interesting.
I'm sorry, I'm just going to cut you off there because I want to let Kathleen rebut. There are 2 specific things I'm interested in your thoughts on. Firstly, the idea that this is a slippery slope to banning things, and secondly, the idea that it's a victimless crime.
Yeah.
So maybe do you want to come back on this?
I think people use this word banning means to prohibit. I'm actually an abolitionist, right? So I make, in my ethics is drawn from anti-slavery. I make a radical distinction between people and things. And I say people aren't things, they aren't pieces of property. And I think there's a corporate mindset coming out of California that wants us to all think of ourselves as pieces of property. So our memories can be enhanced, our bodies can have all these terrific robots in them. Buying into this idea that we're people, that we're property as human beings, will make a very small group of people very, very rich. But for the rest of us, it will create alienation for us. It will disconnect us from each other. It will actually weaken our potential as human beings to create a different kind of world. So that's one of the things I would say. I want to say something about the close connections between robot personhood and corporate personhood. So if there are any Americans in the room, they all remember men were created equal at the American Revolution, but they still owned slaves. It took 14 amendments of the American Constitution to recognize the freed slaves. And you know what happened around the same time is the establishment in America said corporations are persons. They recognize the personhood of corporations. What's going on again? We have a realm in the world where we have the privilege of white men that is being challenged by more inclusivity and more ordinary human beings and men and boys being included in that. What do the elites want to do? They want to recognize the personhood of robots. This is like racial thinking all over again, but now expressed through these new robotic and AI developments.
So, I mean, you mentioned California, which is kind of irrelevant to anything we're doing. We're based in Hong Kong. Our largest development office is in Africa, in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. I was born in Brazil, so it's not about rich white guys in California. It's really about freedom of everyone in the world. And the whole motivation underlying our Singularity Net project is to create an open market for AI using the blockchain to make sure AI is not owned by anyone, but anyone who creates an AI can put it into the network. Anyone who wants to use an AI can reach out to the network. So to me, it's about freedom and openness and decentralization, and about avoiding either big companies or governments from taking control of the emergence of technology, and banning things, unless you're talking about things that are causing direct harm to sentient beings. Banning things is exactly the opposite of the direction that we want to go.
Can I just say that sentient beings are women? Sentient beings are women. And it seems that their exploitation and their sexual abuse is mass and widespread.
Well, we shouldn't sexually abuse women.
Their exploitation, their rape.
If a robot is not conscious,
so you want to skip women and just go straight to a man-made, egocentric AI. Is that what you want to do? Is that your plan?
I'm not in favor of abuse of any sentient being. However, robot which does not have sentience or conscious experience in the sense of people cannot be abused in the sense that a conscious being can. So once we have built AIs and robots that hurt when you hit them, that really have a conscious experience like we do, those robots should have legal rights, and it must be illegal to abuse them. But when a robot does not have experience, then I don't see why we should ban doing whatever we want to it.
I think again, this is distorted thinking, because in the world, we exist in the world, and human beings are exploited, they are raped, they are murdered, right? These are objects, these are commercially produced artifacts, and you want to protect the rights of a commercially produced artifact over and above a human being. It doesn't make any sense.
How would banning sex robots...
If you wanted to help humanity, surely you would put women and children first, and those people in the world that are slaves. In Saudi Arabia, where you've just been, there is a mass slavery problem.
I've not been to Saudi Arabia.
Well, your company.
Hey, I've never been to Saudi Arabia.
Decided to showcase
but let me tell you, in our office in Ethiopia, we have 40% female programmers. We have a project called Girls Can Code there to teach girls age 8 to 18 software development. Taking initiatives like this helps women much more than banning people from buying sex robots. How does banning sex robots help the women and children in Africa? How does it help them?
Well, do you know what will help women and children in Africa? Can I just say the people who are clapping, there are 6 people in the world that own half the world's wealth, and most of them are white men, and they're in corporations in the United States. We are talking about a mass unequal system here. It's not this neutral. Having a few women in programming does not address the commercial, egocentric model that we
How
live
will
in.
banning sex robots stop a handful of wealthy white and Chinese men from controlling a majority of the world's wealth?
Do you know, I'm glad to, governments, let's come back to
These
governments.
guys will buy all the sex robots they
Whatever
want
people might
anyway.
think of governments, you voted for your governments. You did not vote for these corporations. They have no mandate, right, in which to operate in the world. People have the right to elect people, their elected representatives, and they have the right to get rid of them. What we're trying to be persuaded by is this myth that somehow these corporations are neutral in the world and that they're going to do the right thing because it's all about individual freedom. Well, some people believe that it's individual freedom to go and buy a child in the Philippines and watch them being raped and tortured. Some people believe that. It's called libertarianism. I believe we should have a different kind of humanism, and that should, influence how we create technologies and how we create our social systems.
I'm gonna let you just say literally one sentence, and then I'm gonna take a final vote.
I think I've already summarized my main points. I'm certainly not in favor of selling children or women against their will, or exploiting humans or sentient robots in any way. And the fact that one of our robots was made a citizen of Saudi Arabia does not constitute an endorsement of everything the Saudi government does, any more than taking a US government contract constitutes an endorsement of everything Donald Trump does. I mean, we're in favor of freedom and of decentralization. I tend to agree that it's a bad thing for a few major corporations and large governments to have control over technology development or human rights. I would like to see, blockchain, AI, and other technology used to make things more decentralized. But as part of that, we want the governments of the world to increase freedom in any way we can that's not directly hurting people, rather than banning things. Even banning things that aren't all that critical, like sex robots, banning things sets the wrong trend. It's in the wrong direction. We only want to ban things when it's absolutely necessary to do so, to protect people from harm.
I'm afraid we've reached the end of our time. Please say thank you to both panelists. The only thing that now remains is for me to see if you've changed your mind. So I'd like to ask the floor again. Would you ban sex robots? If the answer to that is yes, please raise your hand. Okay, I actually think that you persuaded a few people.
I did, I think so.
So, yeah, brilliant. Thank you very much for your time and for listening to the debate. Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much.